It's Tuesday, March 3rd, 2026. Operation Epic Fury defended by the administration. Kuwait is nice this time of year, and polls next on the AM Update.
Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth opening up Monday morning with some spicy rhetoric that was followed by General Dan Caine, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, with more details on the early hours of the operation to take down Iran's ability to strike America and her interests in the Middle East.
On February 28th, the full strength of America's armed forces came together in a unified purpose against a capable and determined adversary. The United States Army, Navy, Marine Corps, Air Force, Space Force, Coast Guard, and our reserve components integrated across our combatant commands and began coordinated operations with the Israeli armed forces of an unprecedented scale. As the Secretary laid out, our military objectives are clear. Our mission is to protect and defend ourselves and, together with our regional partners, prevent Iran from the ability to project power outside of its borders and be ready for follow-on actions as appropriate. Across every domain, land, air, sea, cyber, the U.S. Joint Force delivered synchronized and layered effects designed to disrupt, degrade, deny, and destroy Iran's ability to conduct and sustain combat operations.
President Trump at the White House yesterday offered another timeline for how long he thinks this will last.
A threat indeed it is. We have the strongest and most powerful by far military in the world, and we will easily prevail. We're already substantially ahead of our time projections, but whatever the time is, it's okay. Whatever it takes, we will always, and we have right from the beginning, we projected 4 to 5 weeks.
4 to 5 weeks, President Trump says. He also offered more details on what they're actually accomplishing, what their firm objectives are for Iran.
But we have capability to go far longer than that. We'll do it. Whatever somebody said today, they said, oh, well, if the president wants to do it really quickly. After that, he'll get bored. I don't get bored. There's nothing boring about this. Do you agree with that, Pete? I don't think there's anything, Mr. General. I think there's nothing boring about it. Somebody actually said from the media, I think he'll get bored after about a week or two. No, we don't get bored. I never get bored.
President Trump also said Iran's missile force must be wiped out, its naval capabilities destroyed, and never be able to build a nuclear weapon. Secretary of State Marco Rubio yesterday afternoon was asked and answered a question he says he's getting a lot.
Two reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. It was automatic, and in fact it bared to be true because in fact within an hour of the initial attack on the leadership compound, the missile forces in the south and in the north, for that matter, had already been activated to launch. In fact, those had already been pre-positioned. The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
So there is Secretary of State Marco Rubio in comments yesterday that were misconstrued far and wide, saying that they knew that Israel was going to attack Iran, and they knew that if Israel attacked first, they would be sitting ducks if they didn't respond with force immediately after the initial strike from Israel. That's been construed as meaning that Israel strong-armed us, Israel roped us into this war, and that's just not true. That's not at all what Secretary Rubio is talking about. And why is that not true? Why do we know this? Well, multiple large outlets have reported, I believe it's been insinuated as well by U.S. officials, the reporting that we brought to you yesterday morning about the CIA facilitating the intel for the strike on Khamenei's residence, his palace in Tehran. Why is that important? If our intelligence enabled Israel to strike Tehran, to strike the palace, then who was actually making the initial decision for Israel to strike Tehran? That would be us, because it was our intel. So again, that has been misconstrued far and wide, those comments from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, insinuating that Israel roped us into another war like the narrative goes along. President Trump also noted now 4 American service members, and this was earlier in the day. I think there's up to 6 now. Central Command have confirmed have fallen. 6 deaths now. President Trump made these comments at the White House yesterday.
Today we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action, and send our love and support to their families. In their memory, we continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is.
President Trump made those comments, and the White House released a partial list detailing every single offense that Iran has waged against America, Americans, and American interests in the region, and really all across the globe. A partial list of all of those offenses, including the 1979 seizing the embassy in Tehran, 1983 Iranian-backed terror group carrying out a suicide car bombing at the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. Also in 83, Hezbollah terrorists, Iran-backed, killing 241 U.S. military personnel, including 220 Marines, 21 other service personnel, in a truck bombing in Beirut. 1984, kidnapping of CIA Station Chief William Buckley, September of 1984. Hezbollah, again, Iran-backed, killing 23 innocent people, including 2 Americans in Beirut again. And the list goes on and on and on, all the way up until August of 2006. Dozens of items there as the White House defends its decision to strike Iran in what it calls a 47-year war. How are things going over the skies, which this has predominantly been an Air Force operation from both the IDF and the United States? How are things going over the skies? Well, Central Command confirmed that in a friendly fire incident over the country of Kuwait in the Middle East, friendly fire, Kuwait accidentally shot down 3 F-15s, our own. It was a friendly fire incident, as I said. All 6 personnel, I believe I saw 6 personnel, were able to eject safely, including this woman who was recovered by just an ordinary citizen in Kuwait in some stunning footage and audio. Listen to this.
You fine? Really? You need something to help you? No problem, you're safe. You're safe, you're safe. Everything good? No problem. Thank you for helping us. Everything perfect?
That is the sound of footage from a downed and recently ejected F-15 pilot in Kuwait, meeting with just an ordinary Kuwaiti who is extraordinarily friendly to the American pilot. As I said, from what I have seen, all 6 crew from those F-15s were able to eject safely. Interesting times. Also interesting times as well. The Prime Minister of Lebanon, after Hezbollah threw their hat into the fracas the other night, launching missiles or launching rockets towards Israel, the Prime Minister of Lebanon issued a statement against Hezbollah. Quote, "We declare our opposition to all military actions originating from Lebanese territory and call on security forces to prevent any attack. We announce a ban on Hezbollah's military activity, limiting its role to political sphere only. Decisions on war and peace are exclusively the responsibility of the government." That's a yo. I believe it's the first time Lebanon has directly invoked Hezbollah in saying, nope, cut it out. That caught my eye the other day. Also this, Qatar is reportedly cutting ties with the Iranian government. A spokesperson told CNN Iran had targeted the country's civilian infrastructure, including its international airport, and that Qatari fighter jets had downed drones and other projectiles. The source said, quote, "An attack like this cannot be left without retaliation. Iran has a price to pay for this blatant attack on our people." That's also a yo. I've talked in passing about what Qatar's motivations truly are. And I just believe, yeah, they have definitely facilitated / been involved / carried out themselves efforts to subvert Western influence, or backed efforts to subvert Western influence, or are the source of that subversion sometimes. But I believe, given that they share that natural gas field with Iran, and they are a much smaller country than Iran, they're basically forced to play this game of never-ending triangulation. Doesn't mean they're absolved from any evil like hosting Hamas, but that kind of gives you more of a window into what their motivations truly are. And now when push comes to shove, now when it's go time, it's time for them to turn their back on Iran and quit the triangulation. When we come back, we hear from the Secretary of War once again with a message for the troops on the front line. That's coming up next.
What's the message to Iran?
Don't.
What is your message to Iran in this moment?
Don't.
I'm gonna bomb the out of them. It's true. I don't care.
Well, that says just about everything you need to know. Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, both with the exact same message for Iran. Quote, don't. Donald Trump campaigning, I believe back in 2016, I'm going to bomb the bleep out of them. That pretty much says everything. And President Trump has been on the record for decades now with his disdain for the mullahs. Want to make a quick correction. It was widely reported by numerous outlets over the weekend, especially on Sunday, that Israel had activated its Jewish space laser program. They are actually working on a program that uses lasers to track and shoot down rockets and potentially missiles. The Israeli military clarified that machine, that operation, was not actually used to shoot down Hezbollah rockets the other night. The view from Europe, here's NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte.
I will say that my thoughts are with the service members, the U.S. service members who made the ultimate sacrifice over the last couple of days. And let me also say that the commander-in-chief, the leader of the free world, President Donald J. Trump, I really commend what is happening here. Taking out Khamenei, taking out the nuclear capability in Iran, but also taking out the ballistic missile program in Iran. This is crucial. And what I see in Europe, I spoke with all the key European leaders over the weekend, is widespread support for what the president is doing, and also making sure that when it comes to logistics, access, defending key U.S. interests in Europe and in the region, the Europeans are really stepping up. First of all, say that
NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, at the very outset of Operation Epic Fury, we heard from a few nations across Europe starting to do their typical pearl clutching, hand wringing. And then when it became pretty obvious what the Israelis and Americans were capable of and carrying out, they came hither. It helped in a weird way that both, as we talked about yesterday, both French interests and UK interests were the targets of various Iranian projections over the weekend. So that kind of brought them into the fold. And now NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte says, yes, basically all of Europe is on board with this, as if we care. But it's nice to know anyway, except for Spain. We even saw Emmanuel Macron come out the other day, I think it was just yesterday, saying they're going to start building more nuclear warheads, France is, and not disclose how many they actually have. Started to talk tough, saying that the only way forward is to project strength. So, that's interesting as well. Let's talk about polls. People want to know how this is going to impact the midterms. I don't think as we sit here today, and I could be saying something completely different this time next week, I really don't think that it's going to have, that this operation in Iran is going to have that much impact on the midterms. If the Strait of Hormuz is actually blockaded, which Iran has announced the strait is closed. Well, you can't close the strait. It's not a canal. They kept trying to announce and let everybody know that the Strait of Hormuz is closed. You cannot close a strait. It's neither here nor there. Central Command came out in the afternoon yesterday saying, no, it's open. It's just a little bit dangerous right now. Based on what I've seen as well, there has been a downturn in shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, but not a complete elimination of shipping, so something to keep an eye on. This latest poll comes from Harvard-Harris. It's the latest in, I think, about 3 polls that I've seen in recent days. Congressional ballot polls. Really good for Republicans out of nowhere. This Harvard-Harris poll that came out yesterday shows the congressional generic ballot tied 50-50. Republicans gaining ground from January, erasing some Democrat gains. Also, this poll, very good news economically for the administration. Now, more people believe that the economy is stronger than it was even in November. This is just the most recent poll that I've seen, showing some good signs for the midterms for Republicans. We shall see if that holds. And now here's this. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, during his news conference yesterday morning, delivered about a 2-minute message straight directly for the troops on the front line.
This is your moment. This is the generational turning point America has waited for since 1979, and since the rudderless wars of hubris my generation, our generation, endured. Don't listen to the noise. Just stay focused. Our commander-in-chief is steady at the wheel. We face a determined enemy, but you are better. But we must prove it every single day. History doesn't care if we're tired, if we're scared, or if the fight feels big. It demands warriors who rise anyway. Peace through strength, the warrior ethos, lethality, unity of purpose, those are not slogans. They're the beating heart of what it means to wear the uniform, that uniform. You think clearly under fire, you act decisively in chaos, you uphold the Constitution, and you uphold our country without hesitation. We are not defenders anymore. We are warriors, trained to kill the enemy and break their will. History is watching. Be the force you swore an oath to be: focused, disciplined, lethal, and unbreakable. We will finish this on America First conditions of President Trump's choosing. Nobody else's, as it should be. And know this above all, President Trump and I have your back, always. Through fire, through criticism, through fake news, through everything. We unleash you because you are the best, most powerful, most lethal fighting force the world has ever seen. May Almighty God watch over you, and his providential arms of protection extend over you. Godspeed, warriors.
Secretary of War Pete Hegseth with an inspiring message for the coalition forces on the front line. And finally, air analysis, slightly acidic, mostly necessary. So what is the objective in Iran anyway? That's obviously the most crucial, pertinent question. Here's the way I see it. I think, given everything we've heard from the administration, and it could very well be that this misdirection, this lack of communication, this over-communication, the communication of 14 different messages on what the goal is here, is in order to stave off intel disruptions from the likes of Russia or China or other actors who would try to put the kibosh on this entire campaign. But reading in between the lines, here's what I see. Basically, a maximum flexibility operation. I think what they're trying to accomplish is completely defanging Iran, with the understanding that maybe coming out of this, the Iranian people, the non-IRGC military in Iran, might actually take over the government. That would be the highest and best, that would be the best outcome but it's an outcome that probably wouldn't be fully realized for like a decade. The other option, which I think is far more likely, is this is a complete and total defanging of Iran's ability to project power outside of its borders. That's what we heard multiple people say here this morning. That's what we heard multiple people say. Understanding that, hey, once we get the job done, however long that takes, we've got total air superiority. Once we're done, once we're satisfied, we've basically taken the fangs out. We can just move on and see you again in 5 years or 10 years if the people don't rise up and take over the government. That's really what I see going on here. It's pretty much that simple. Now, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, 10th order impacts of things like this. Difficult to predict. I don't even think that an AI like Ultron from the MCU could game theory out what happens in a scenario like this. I don't think that's possible. So there's always going to be things that are unforeseen that happen. It's pretty clear now that there is no command structure with Iran and its military. The number of missile launches that they were able to muster and send towards Israel and other places, much lower yesterday than it was the day before, and it was lower than the day before that. I think it's clear that Iran is in a very weak position right now. There is a vacuum right now. Very little news coming out of Iran other than pictures, videos here and there. So this is very much to be determined. But that's, as we sit here this morning, that's kind of where I see this thing. Yes, there's talk of regime change, but that's kind of a cherry on the top and something that, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, wouldn't be fully realized if it was completely clean for like a decade. The hundreds of thousands of IRGC and other forces within Iran that are still loyal to the mullahs, rooting that out doesn't just happen overnight. So that would be one option, but I think what's more likely here and what they're totally fine with effecting here is getting rid of Iran's ability to project power outside of its own territory. They're also sending the message, hey, we know where you are, we know when you are, and we know when you were, as Ayatollah Khomeini found out the other morning. That's going to do it for a Tuesday. Back at it again tomorrow. I'm Aaron McIntire, and this is the AM Update.